MAGA cultists in Congress have spread countless lies to justify their baseless impeachment inquiry into President Biden. So Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman went on CNN to debunk some of them in real time. But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. Maybe check out my Patreon. I'd appreciate the support. All right, folks, so there has not been much by way of honesty from the Republican Party with respect to the now 9-month, 8-month investigation into President Biden by way of his son, Hunter Biden. There's been very little basis to it. There's been very little substantiation of the claims. And now we have a formal impeachment inquiry into the president. And the Republicans are ratcheting up the lies to try to justify to the American people, who, by the way, according to polls, are not believing it, as to why the impeachment inquiry is necessary. So Representative Dan Goldman, a Democratic congressman who is one of their best debaters, their best litigants, went on CNN to debunk some of these right-wing talking points. So I've got a few clips to play, and we're going to start with this one here.
So are you saying that she's wrong there, that this does not give them any more power to go after those bank records of President Biden or his family members?
Yes, she's wrong. And the speaker said it himself. You would need a House vote to start a formal impeachment process that would potentially get, more authority through the impeachment process. Of course, if Speaker McCarthy wants to talk about precedent, let's look at the precedent, which is that Donald Trump's administration gave zero cooperation, zero documents. But even
so first things first, the claim that he's specifically referring to is this idea that they have to do a formal impeachment inquiry because it elevates their authority to get access to documents and information. As far as we can tell, there's actually no basis for that. And any additional authority, or any additional prestige, rather, because that's what it really is, would be associated with a full vote. Kevin McCarthy would have to put the impeachment inquiry to a vote. Hey, House of Representatives, do you vote for a formal impeachment inquiry into the president? And then if he gets the majority votes, then subpoenas issued from that formal impeachment inquiry would potentially be taken more seriously by a court if President Biden were to challenge any of the subpoenas. But there's no additional authorities that's unlocked. It's not like you go from a level 9 to a level 10, which is why they've never been able to substantiate those claims. Dan Goldman saying the impeachment inquiry was unnecessary because it doesn't unlock any additional authority. And by the way, if we're talking about precedent, when Donald Trump's administration was impeached, he did not cooperate at all. So why should Joe Biden, if we're really talking about what the precedent is? But another clip I want to play concerns the amount of cooperation that President Biden has been giving the Republican Party, much more than they deserve.
Just to my friend Congresswoman Mesa's point about the bank records, they have over 12,000 pages of bank records, and none of them trace back to Joe Biden. They have looked at suspicious activity reports. None of them link to Joe Biden, which is why you always hear them talk about the Biden family or Hunter Biden. But they are not impeaching the Biden family, and they are not impeaching Hunter Biden. This is an impeachment inquiry into President Biden, and there is no link, zero evidence to justify this.
So, as Dan Goldman points out, President Biden has provided more than 12,000 records to to Congress, to the House of Representatives, to the Oversight Committee, 12,000 documents to try to appease them in this witch hunt. And they have found no direct link to President Biden. And as he correctly points out, otherwise they would be producing it for the American people. Instead, they're trying to conflate Joe Biden with Hunter Biden, who are two separate people, Hunter Biden being Joe Biden's son, and then the Biden family. He's right. They do the sleight of hand all the time because they have nothing. President Biden has been cooperating, but between the bank records and the suspicious activity reports, which, by the way, are mere allegations, mere insinuations. They're not substantiated acts of corruption. They're just saying, hey, these are potentially suspicious activities. None of them have directly linked Joe Biden to any misconduct. Okay, and that's, again, after 12,000 documents and thousands of suspicious activity reports. This is a witch hunt, pretty nakedly. The last clip I want to show here, again, is another debunk by Dan Goldman in real time.
Talk about the power that they have now that this is an inquiry. You're saying that unless that they have a full House vote, that they do not have the power to request more documents from these agencies that essentially you're saying the administration can ignore the requests that they get from the lawmakers that he's put in charge?
No, they have the same power today that they had yesterday, and the administration has provided numerous documents and witnesses. They haven't specified what they have been unable to get. I haven't heard a single Republican say, we asked for this and we are not getting it. There is nothing that they're not getting. The Biden administration has been far more cooperative than the Trump administration was. Multiple different agencies have been cooperating with the Republican investigations. They've been doing this for 8 or 9 months. What I'm saying is they don't have any greater authority today than they did yesterday to get the materials, but they've gotten the materials. And unfortunately for them, those materials do not support any high crime or misdemeanor, much less any wrongdoing or misconduct.
So what's the basis for the impeachment inquiry? What is the basis for, like, what led them to call for the formal impeachment inquiry? And then what is the formal impeachment inquiry for? Well, it sounds like there's no basis for it, right? They don't actually have any evidence to justify the impeachment inquiry. And then in terms of additional authority, again, there's no basis for that either, right? At the end of the day, what's interesting is it just goes back to that double standard, that asymmetry, which I've said that we all actually play into to one extent or another. You could easily make the argument that the Biden administration has also been playing into it too, because even though this is an openly, shamelessly naked partisan witch hunt to just simply hurt President Biden politically, President Biden's cooperated with it for whatever reason, either this sense of bipartisanship, perhaps he feels that, or they feel that, this may eventually deter Republicans. I don't know. But there's no basis for this impeachment inquiry, and yet Joe Biden has provided thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of documents. They have provided witnesses. There's been executive branch agency cooperation, and that's more than what Democrats got when they impeached Donald Trump for substantive reasons with an impeachment inquiry that actually had a full House vote. And by the way, the Trump Department of Justice, their Office of Legal Counsel, issued an opinion that unless an impeachment inquiry has a full vote to back it up, it's not legitimate in the eyes of the executive branch, and therefore the executive branch isn't compelled or isn't obligated to cooperate. So let's think about that. Under Trump's own rules, this impeachment inquiry that Kevin McCarthy created, which doesn't have a vote to support it, if President Biden wanted, he could simply just say, well, I'm going to hold to the Trump standard, which says that until you have a vote, I'm not obligated to do anything or to cooperate in any respect. And yet he is still cooperating. If this doesn't go to show the stark differences in principle between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, I don't know what will. At the end of the day, to a fault, perhaps, the Democratic Party and President Biden are principled. They are willing to engage in good faith with openly, nakedly, unapologetically bad faith actors like the Republican Party. And perhaps, and I say this as an unapologetic partisan myself, perhaps it's time for President Biden and the Democrats to say, you know what? We've given you grace. We've given you slack. We've played the game to an extent, but there's a limit to our magnanimity. There's a limit to our cooperation. And maybe you need to start raising your game before we start playing by your rules.